My name is David.
And my name is Jason.
And this is Discern Realities, a Dungeon World podcast. Our first segment is What Happened Here Recently. Today, listeners, we wanted to have someone from one of our sister podcasts, Pocket-Sized Play, share a story about a Dungeon World experience that he had recently. So, Tor?
The new campaign with my 10-year-old has been on hiatus for a little while, but we finally got back into it, and he had an epic battle against a huge 2-hit-point stone golem. It was all about fictional positioning and navigating the golem's body and surrounding structures. And ugly choices. When he got to the golem's eyes the first time and rolled poorly, the golem dropped the puppy he had abducted, and the hero chose to forgo the perfect opportunity to save the animal instead. After a serious beating and significant collateral damage, the hero finally managed to take the monstrosity down with help from a crowd of townspeople. The help obviously consisted of a hastily gathered dancing band distracting the golem and a hunter that threw his crossbow to the hero at a crucial moment. One bolt in each eye did the trick.
Awesome, Tor. That's a great story. I love it. Listeners, stick around after this episode for the exclusive premiere episode of Dungeon World in the Eyes of a Young Adventurer featuring Tor and his son. Our next segment is What Should I Be on the Lookout For?
Okay, so every now and then I like to talk about games that are not Dungeon World, but that our listeners might nevertheless be interested in. And today I wanted to talk about Sorcerers Sellswords by our friend Ray Otis. Ray, in addition to being a game designer, he also designed our logo for Discern Realities. Actually, for several of our podcasts, he designed the logos for. So Sorcerers Sellswords, I've played it before. It's a really cool game. It's a weird fantasy game. Think Thundar the Barbarian, maybe something like Carcosa-ish, something like that, right? Very swords and sorcery, but with maybe like strange bits mixed in.
This is like Conan the Barbarian.
Conan a little bit, yeah. He describes it as weird fantasy, so interpret that however you wish. It's based off of John Harper's game, Lasers and Feelings, which is a really cool gonzo camp sci-fi game, famously just on a single sheet of paper, front and back. The game is essentially powered by the apocalypse. It has a lot of the principles of Powered by the Apocalypse behind it, and its mechanics even follow the sort of partial success, full success, sort of like gameplay style, but it uses a slightly different die mechanic, okay? So the way it works is the characters are very stripped down. You have some descriptive things for them that you choose, but essentially you have to pick a number between 2 and 5. A low number means that you'll be better at sorcery, and a high number means you'll be better at swords. Now, sorcery is weird powers, ancient alien artifacts, intuition, persuasion, or passionate action. Swords is mundane tools and weapons, logic, diplomacy, and calm, precise action. So basically everything that you do that will require a die roll, like any action you take that where, there might be consequences or whatever, they fall under either swords or sorcery, okay? And so it's really, really like a very stripped down sort of skill system, I guess, or way of looking at your character. You build a little die pool between 1 and 3 dice, depending on different factors. And if you're doing a sorcery action, you roll the dice and you count the number of dice that are over your skill number. And if for a swords action, you count the number of dice under your skill number. And depending on the number of successes that you get, it determines the degree of like your success, from it goes wrong all the way to a critical success. Okay, so it can go wrong, or you can barely manage it, or you can do it well, or you can get a critical success. If any of your dice roll on the skill number, like you roll the exact number, then you get what's called an insight. And it allows you as the player to ask the GM some questions about what's going on in the scenario. That's kind of a way that your characters can learn about what's going on, right? I really like it because It is really simple. You can get it to the table like in a very, very fast way. It actually has like some tables that you roll on in order to kind of figure out what your basic starting problem is, like what your quest is. And then otherwise, the gameplay is really just kind of driven by the character's actions and by the die results and that sort of thing. To me, it's a really, really good way of exercising sort of like Powered by the Apocalypse muscles without all of the overhead of like a full Powered by the Apocalypse game, right? Because you can get it to the table really quickly, and it's meant to be played like as a one shot or maybe in a couple sessions. The stakes are pretty low. The rules overhead is really low, and yet you get a lot of the feeling of like narrative driven play. I think it's just a really good little like, hey, you guys want to try this game that's a little different. You don't want your more traditional role-playing game group to be dropped right straight into Dungeon World. Maybe you want to ease them into the idea of narrative-driven play. I think this is a really, really good tool to do that.
Yeah, it sounds like it'd be a good one for people who've never played any kind of game before. Like, I think you can jump right into Dungeon World, but if you want an additional transitional step, this sounds like a good one.
Yeah, I think that's right. Right now, Ray actually has an expanded edition of the game out. It's a new edition, and I haven't played this new edition yet, but I've checked it out, though. It's got new art. He's added like a bunch of like new callings, which are basically like your character's job or whatever, to the game as well. A lot of fun little touches, fun stuff, and it's available for free. Like, he makes this available for free. There's no reason not to at least go download it and check it out. If you need like just a fast, quick hit of fantasy to get to the table, this is a cool one.
Yeah, and where can we get it?
It's at jellysaw.com. That's Ray's company, Jellysaw Games, and we'll include a link in the show notes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, Ray puts a lot of stuff out there for free. He's pretty great.
Yeah, he's got a bunch of other games too. Yeah, they're all like short form games. So
awesome. Let's go ahead and move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What Here Is Not What It Appears to Be. This week, I would like to talk about two moves. Both of these moves are kind of your bread and butter for exploring dungeons in Dungeon World. These are your basic ones, but they are near and dear to my heart, especially the first one. And these two moves are Discern Realities and Spout Lore.
Discern Realities and Spout Lore to me are the key to Dungeon World. Like, to me, they're like the absolute thing that makes Dungeon World special. So.
Right. And I think we have a lot of things that we do with them that maybe other people don't necessarily do. And I'd just kind of like to talk about, how we go about our Discern Realities and our Spout Lores. Hopefully we've demonstrated it in the AP segments, but I would just like to, kind of hammer it down a little bit.
There's some good questions there about like when and how often do you trigger these moves, right?
Right. So yeah, let's just jump right into the discussion. So when you have someone who's trying to find something or trying to figure out something about an object, like how many times would you even let them roll Discern Realities or Spout Lore?
So it's really situation dependent, right? And I think you have to take each move. I would handle them a little, like I think I handle each of them a little differently. Okay,
so let's start with Discern Realities. Yeah, so someone comes into a room and they are like, they give it a once over. Like, that's a Discern Realities.
I think it depends. If the room is fairly small and there's, like maybe it's like someone's personal quarters or something like that, I usually just straight away tell them like all the immediate obvious things in the room, right? There's a trunk, there's a wardrobe, there's a bed. And if they say, well, I'm going to go open the wardrobe and see what's in there, that to me, that's not necessarily a Discern Realities. To me, that's just them opening up the wardrobe and seeing what they can see, right? But if they instead describe their character, if they describe what they're doing as hitting that threshold of examining something closely, that's usually when, for me, DR triggers. The small room is maybe not a great example. Think about like the large temple chamber that has a fountain in the middle of it, and then an altar, and then, a couple of transepts, that kind of thing, right? You might have a whole party of people who are doing different things in there. Maybe one says, well, I'm going to go examine that altar. Okay, well, so that's a Discern Realities for that altar, right? And you might have somebody who's just like, I'm just roaming around the room, just generally looking for dangers and troubles. That would be like a Discern Realities for the whole room, maybe. But you could also have a situation where maybe you have two people who enter this large chamber, and they both say, well, I'm just searching around for just danger and treasure generally, like in this big room. And if they're both doing that, to me, that's probably 1 Discern Realities plus 1 aid.
Yeah, you could either, I guess in that situation, you could either ask them more specifically where they look, or you could give them an aid.
It's all about scope to me. Like, I think it's all about scope. Like, what's the scope of the location, and what's the scope of like what the player says the character is doing? That to me, like, is when I determine like when that move fires, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
So what if they fail the initial roll and they are wanting to like look again because they didn't find anything? Would you ever let them?
I've never I can't say I've ever had that happen. And I think the reason why is because normally if a Discern Realities triggers and they're searching for something and the move fails, or the move, it's not a fail, it's a miss, they get a miss. Normally that, in my games, that usually means some kind of danger happens, you know, like a monster enters the room or some kind of trap goes off or something like that, right? And for whatever reason, that tends to take up the fictional oxygen. And then when it's over, then sometimes after when it's over, they, you know, if they think about it, they'll say, okay, well, I want to continue searching that and see what I can find. At that point, I normally just tell them what was there. I don't bother with another DR roll.
Okay. What about Spout Lore? What if, you know, they get a magical item, you don't tell them how to use it, and they're trying to figure it out, so they're spouting lore on it?
And they, fail, and they want to do it again? Or?
They either fail, or they only get the interesting bit, not the useful bit.
Oh, I see. Okay. I normally will allow another Spout Lore if there's a good fictional justification for them getting it again. So, for example, here's a good example. The party decides that, okay, well, this seems like this has some religious iconography on it. So the cleric, you're probably the best one to handle this, right? So the cleric does his thing. Or let's say he gets a 6, and then somebody helps him, bumps him up to a 7. Okay, they're figuring this out. They find out something interesting, but not the useful thing.
Uh-huh.
I normally, in practice, what ends up happening is that the players just accept that and they put it back in their pack, and then they might deal with it later, right? And then usually it's the later that's the important part there. So maybe when they get back to town and they go consult in a library about what this thing might do, or they go find help or whatever. That might not even be a Spout Lore. It might just be finding the right person to help you, right?
Right.
If they're trying to get another Spout Lore, like in a really, really close temporal proximity to when they last did it, like say in the dungeon, like, okay, we made camp and it's the next day and hey, I'd like to look at that item again and see what I know. They've got to provide some kind of justification for checking it out again. Either they have a book, or they discover something later in the dungeon that helps them, like that refines their thinking or something like that. That's normally how I'd handle that.
Okay, yeah, seems like a good way of handling it.
They don't get to just try it and then wake up the next day and try it again. Like, that's
it doesn't
absurd.
Just refresh like in a video game.
No. And usually, like, when one person has like decided that they're going to try to do the Spout Lore on it, my players don't usually like try to power game the situation. Like, they don't say, oh, well, the cleric failed, maybe the ranger knows something. Like, they usually just kind of, it's just sort of an understood thing at the table. Like, it's the cleric's jam, let's see if the cleric can figure it out. It's clearly not the ranger's jam, so the ranger's not, interested in it. So in practice, I don't find it to be a problem.
Yeah, so if you have some magical item that would seemingly be nobody's jam, like, how do you justify the players knowing anything about it to let them spout lore, or do you tell them you can't spout lore on it?
Boy, it's a tough question. Well, so here's the thing: they don't have to justify their knowledge until after they succeed, right? So once the move fires, that's when I can ask, how do you know that? Like, once I tell them what the thing is, I can then ask them, how do you know? So we inform that part later. The determining like who should spout lore about it, that's really just more of a like, it's like a party thing, usually the players decide that for themselves. I don't personally give a shit who does the spout lore, right? It's usually the players who are like, well, this seems like more like your thing, wizard, so what do you know about this, right? And they let the wizard do it. I don't care how the roll gets triggered, honestly. Initially, that doesn't concern me, because I'm going to ultimately ask the players, well, how do you know that? And then they have to justify their knowledge, right?
Well, okay, so here's another thing. What if your players are in a room where there like isn't anything, but they're like describing like looking around and things like that? Will you ever let them discern realities on a room like that? What you're saying.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, I have not prepared anything in that room. It's like a blank room or whatever, right?
Right.
Which you should have. You should have blank spaces in your dungeon, right? So I haven't prepared anything, but the players are really interested in searching through it anyway. Does Discern Realities trigger? I think the answer is yes, but again, I think it's a little situational dependent. So if, for example, I have described something in the room that I meant to just be like a bit of color, like I described some sort of like painting on a wall or something just to kind of add a little bit of like texture to the scene, but for whatever reason the player's really interested in it, like you can tell when your players are really interested in something. And it's weird. It's always a funny moment, but it's fun. As a GM, it's fun. Like I had no intention for this thing to be interesting or like to be of any practical use or to have any secrets. I just thought it was a cool thing to throw in there in the description. But the player really grabs onto it and thinks it's something important. I definitely let them spout lore or discern realities because, and I may have nothing in mind, and I'll make some shit up on the fly because clearly because if the player was interested in it, it means they're going to naturally be interested in the answer too, right? And it's going to be and it's going to be a story they're going to be excited about. If you can't think of anything on the fly, oh boy, just turn it right back around to the players. Open it up to the table. Say, what do you think he finds, or what do you think this thing means? And then just talk it out with him and work it out. It's okay. You don't always have all the answers for the dungeon. Your players are always going to search things that you didn't put anything there. Like you didn't necessarily think it was going to be something that would have secrets to spill. But if the players seem interested in it and they think it means something, I think it's okay to give it a chance to mean something, see how it goes. That's what leads to good story, right? That's what makes Dungeon World great. Oh, one other thing I would say about Discern Realities, when I first started playing Dungeon World, I would, before I really got a good handle on how to manage the system, I would make thieves check for traps at every door and down every corridor. And same for Discern Realities. We'd do Discern Realities on every fucking door, on every room. You don't have to do that. In fact, you sometimes, it's a great way of sort of pacing your game really as a GM. If you say, you can go ahead and search this area. This roll counts for this whole area right here, like all these doors and all this stuff. This roll, this trap detection counts for all that, right? That's fine.
Oh yeah, that's pretty good.
Don't make your players do DR or trap check or whatever on every single goddamn thing. Just don't. It's just not. It's frustrating. It slows the game down. So.
Yeah, that's a good tip there for controlling your pacing. You could do more or less depending, I guess. Cool. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next segment. Our next segment is what here is useful or valuable to me.
I thought it would be fun to do some small scale magic items. I've got 3 magic items they're kind of like make camp magic items. They're like items that you would use during a little bit of downtime. I should mention these are all by Farrell Riley, who wrote all these, so give credit to him for that. The first is called the Smokeless Pipe. The faint scent of cherry tobacco lingers on the edges of the dark-stained wood. Inside, a smoky quartz crystal flickers with an inner fire. When you light your pipe, the full richness of the taste relaxes your body. You may make camp without consuming a ration.
The next one is the Brass Kettle. At every meal and at every ceremony, the whistling of well-loved and well-worn brass kettles heralds good health, and some say the secrets of eternal life. But while many praise the leaves, no one pays much attention to what holds the brew. Drinking tea brewed from this kettle heals 1 HP.
And finally, the Traveler's Notebooks. Batachikhan, the League Strider, traveled across the 3 continents. He always wrote home to his mother to tell her the amazing things he had seen. Whatever you write in one of these notebooks appears in another. The notebooks may or may not be found in pairs. I like that last one in particular because it has a sense of mystery to it, you write something in the notebook and you don't know where it's going necessarily. But
you don't know maybe who all can be reading in on it.
Reading it, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that could be really cool if you had somebody far away who's your mission lord. He sent you out here, and you guys are trying to communicate back and forth. But what you didn't know is someone else also has a book.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I thought those were fun. We don't often get to see things that we don't often get items that like are specifically used like during party downtime. So I thought those were kind of fun.
Yeah, they're really nice. A nice little thing that could be in a dungeon or that somebody could buy at a shop if they're, doing that thing in the city where people buy things.
Right. Yeah. Although actually, per the rules of the game, you can't purchase magic items. But
yeah, but you could purchase a brass kettle.
You could purchase a brass kettle, a really fine brass kettle. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, thanks, Farrell. I love them. Let's go ahead and move on to the next segment. Our next segment is What is About to Happen.
This is our ongoing comic strip AP featuring the adventures of Lucero Castafiel. When we last saw Lucero, he had just hoisted himself into a tree in order to make camp. He's injured right now, and he's out in the wilderness. He's got a decoy set up down below near his fire, along with a noise-making sort of like trap contraption thing in case somebody enters the camp. So he'll wake up and be warned about it. And also, you had just rolled a miss too when you went to sleep, right?
Yeah. Lucero's got a lot of misses.
And we described Lucero, falling asleep and that being okay. Lucero, you may be having a dream. It's unclear, but you open your eyes and find yourself in the tree. It's still nighttime. The moon's up still. And you see the figure of a person floating in midair at the height of where you're at in the tree, 10, 15 feet away from you. You see them in silhouette, probably a woman, just based off the size and shape of their body. Long hair billowing out to the side, a cloak fluttering behind them, traveling clothes. And it seems like this person is just floating in midair staring at you. What do you do?
How far away are they?
I'd say about 10 feet, 15 feet, maybe.
Yeah, so I'm lashed up in this tree. I've got my weapon wrapped around me. I'm going to, pinch myself to see if I'm awake or if I'm dreaming.
You believe you're awake.
Yeah, my leg is probably throbbing and my eye socket is probably
indeed,
oozing uncomfortably.
Unless you just have very, very vivid dreams, right? Yeah.
I could, yeah. I don't know. In a quavering voice, whisper out, "Who's there?"
This person, whose arms are kind of out to the side, and their hands splayed, right? And they're hovering in the air. They float a little bit closer to you, and now in the moonlight and the ambient campfire light, which is dying, by the way, it's getting a little low. You can see their features better. It's your sister, Lucero Castafiel. She's wearing, as I've described, black traveling clothes and a cloak, and she has a medallion around her neck that bears the sigil of your house. I'd like to know a little bit about your relationship with Lugana. Just sort of generally. What are your feelings towards her? What's your history? That kind of thing.
I know that Lugana is risen from her grave.
She's one of the victims of your family's curse, yes.
Before that happened, she was older than me. She was a proxy mother because I had to leave home to work on what was my craft, my calling, being a fighter. And she came with me because she was training in different womanly arts that were at my uncle's house where I was training. And she would comfort me like a mother would a child when I was hurt from my training, or when I was sad that we had left home, or whatever, small matters that happen to children who are away.
So you have positive feelings for her then, in general?
Definitely before she rose.
What about now? Now that she's a vampire?
Now it's complicated. It's not something I can deal with very easily. this feeling of love for a motherly figure, but the horror of her desecration and unholiness is really conflicting. I feel initially seeing and recognizing that it's her an instant of love, and then instantly remorse and pity for her condition.
Lucero, I wasn't sure if I was going to find you. I've been tracking you for a number of days, and here you are.
Why have you come here, sister? Why do you not sleep in your grave?
Word has reached me, brother. Our sister, Urbina. I have learned where she is at.
What is Urbina? What has become of her? I have not seen her in months.
Her body is being held by a group of religious fanatics who worship the peerless star Carcosa.
She is dead?
Yes.
What happened? How did this happen?
I do not know the details yet. I know only that they have her. And I fear that if she rises, they may attempt to destroy her.
I must recover her. She must be put in the Castafiel crypt, where she may have some chance at rest. Perhaps she will not fall victim.
Nevertheless, we can't risk it. We must get to her as quickly as possible. I fear I cannot. I am at very nearly the limits of how far I can roam. And you're in no good condition to go find her, and yet you are pointed in the right direction. The city you're heading to now, fortuitously, is the same city that these religious fanatics have their central temple, and quite possibly our sister.
I look up in the night sky and see a bright star. I say, that direction?
Yes. And then she floats a little closer, and she says, do you have a knife?
Yes.
She holds out her right hand, which has a soft black leather glove, and she pulls it off to reveal her, even in the moonlight, her very white, pale hand. And she holds it up to you, and she says, cut my wrist and drink of my blood.
I will not do this thing, Lugana.
You must do this thing. It will take you days to recover. Perhaps my blood, which seems to have regenerative properties, can speed the process along.
No, Lugana. I will not put myself under the power of this curse. It may take me days, but it will not imperil my soul.
She is now staring at you, staring into your eyes, almost staring through you in a way. You are starting to feel a little lightheaded, and she is whispering words that are escaping her lips, but her mouth is not moving, and words that you do not recognize.
Lugana, stop this immediately. And I'm loosening some slack from my chain. Lugana, do not make me do this.
Roll plus con.
7.
Describe how you managed to resist her charms, but you're also going to take a debility, shaky perhaps.
I have to do something that I don't want to do. I have to lash out at her with Bloodless and flail the chain at her.
Let's just leave it there and pick it up next time.
All right. That just leaves one final question. Who's really in control here?
So, Discern Realities is a production of David, myself, and the Gauntlet community. We have a website at gauntlet-rpg.com. On that website, there are links to our G+ community, which is awesome. You should go join it, as well as links to our various meetups, including Gauntlet Hangouts, where we schedule online games. We are on Twitter at GauntletRPG.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, listeners. That's our show. Don't forget to stick around after the show for the exclusive premiere episode of Dungeon World in the Eyes of a Young Adventurer. And now, Discern Realities presents Dungeon World in the Eyes of a Young Adventurer, a micro-sized podcast featuring Tor and Wind.
Hi, I'm Tor, and this is Wind.
This is Wind here.
What happened when you travelled to Bumble Island?
When we got there, somebody said, "It took my puppy!" And then I ran into the smoke, and there was smoke and fire. In the middle of the square, there was a huge stone golem, red eyes, which are supposed to be red crystal. In the hand holds a cute little puppy.
So what did you do then?
I attacked it with my sword, but it was too much for my sword. And then it attacked. So then I told the old man that to bring us dancing group by showing a dancing signal.
What happens next?
Oh, after that I decided to try and climb up the golem, but it knew I was here. It's like it thinks I'm a gnat. You know, G-N-A-T-N-T.
What's that?
Gant. You know these ant creatures?
Oh, the ant
Ants.
creatures.
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't heard about those
It's
things
like-
before.
it's
Do
like-
they look like ants?
Yeah, but they're grey.
Okay, so the golem thought you were a gnat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I kept on whacking its back like mad. And I was almost made into Wind's marmalade,
Oh.
but like squished. Anyway, after that I decided to get the head. But then before I could attack, it dropped the puppy, and I made my choice. I jumped down, and then I decided to use my shield as a double cat's. But then I realized I didn't have my shield because, well, you see, when I tried to attack it, it sort of grabbed me and threw me into a house.
Yeah. Was that before this happened?
Yeah, it was before this happened. Anyway, then I managed to get the puppy, but then scream, grab, and then I suddenly was inside a huge stone fist with the puppy on top of me. And then I realized the giant stone fist was the hand of the golem. And then the dancing parade arrived out of the smoke.
Did that look cool?
Yeah, and then after that, I threw the puppy down to the old man, and the hunter gave me a new item, the dun 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 hunter's crossbow. This is much better than a bow. Well, you don't have a bow or slingshot.
Okay, so what did you do when you had a new item?
I used one of the wrenches to shoot the red eyes. Now this time I hit the bullseye. And then after I hit but then I decided to hide, and then it saw me, and then I ran around into the crowd, getting another
Didn't
wrench.
something happen to you before you ran into the crowd?
Oh yeah, I did got smacked a lot of times. Like the golem jumped and.
Maybe you should describe it, because people who are listening,
Well,
they
it
can't
was-
see what you're doing.
Well, you see, it was the golem attacked me with its hand, and finally it did a fist in my face, and then I realized my arm had gone terrible numb. It isn't broken; it was numb, completely numb, like completely numb when you can't feel your arm. So I couldn't feel it. And so but lucky I used my left arm for the last cross wrench, and I stopped the next, and then I ran into the crowd, and then after I rolled my way into the crowd before it can smack me with its double hands, slap, like this. Like, if you ever play Sly 1, the raccoonist, well, You know, if you've ever faced against the red panda, the fire panda I meant, well, he does the same thing, but this time in front of me, like on top of his head, and smack. Anyway, I rolled my way into the crowd, and I managed to dodge it by rolling my way into the crowd, and it couldn't find me.
Why did it want to find you?
'Cause it's angry. And I got another wrench from one of the dancers, and I aimed, then kazam, kaboom, blah. The last crystal exploded, and it yelled with anger, and then it went black, total black, and then rocks came shooting out. Everyone managed to look for cover, and I also managed to look for cover too, along with the puppy. So anyway, that's what happened on Bumble Island.
Cool. It's a great story. Did you have fun
Yeah.
when you play that game?
Yeah.
You wonder what's going to happen next?
Yeah. When signing off. Bye.